Amen.
Amen.
There's a passage of scripture in Acts chapter 1, the verse is number 8. It says this, "But you will receive power, and the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, and in all Judea, and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." The book of Acts is one of the most timely books of the New Testament because it illustrates that when the people of God come together to do things, they will happen. Looking at this passage, and if I was going to preach tonight, I would probably use the subject, who will take the gospel to Samaria? But I have not been asked to preach tonight. I've been asked to share a little bit about my journey and about my story tonight and out here. My name is Dolphus and I was born with 2 strikes against me. One of the strikes is I was born black. And the second strike is I was born in Mississippi. And let me tell you something, I had nothing to do with being born black.
Amen.
And I had nothing to do with being born in Mississippi. Let me tell you something, being born black in Mississippi also meant that you were poor. That means I grew up in a poor family. At one point, 9 of us lived in a 3-room house. Some of you heard me say 3-bedroom.
No.
9 of us lived in a 3-room house. And guess what? When 9 people live in a 3-bedroom house, every room is a bedroom. I grew up at a time that breakfast was flour and water. Now some of y'all looking at me saying,
Oh, yeah.
wait a minute, you like to know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about? Breakfast was flour and water. You took flour and water and made biscuits. And you took flour and water and made gravy. And that was breakfast. Every now and then we'd have breakfast made up of water, flour, and sugar. You take sugar and water and make sugar syrup. And you take flour, you don't know about the chicken. And you take flour and water and make biscuits. That was breakfast. I was shocked when I got to junior college and they started talking about something called a balanced breakfast. A balanced breakfast. And I was sitting there going, what in the world? You have to have 2 strips of bacon, you had to have 2 pieces of toast, you had to have juice, you had to have milk, you had to have eggs, that was called a balanced breakfast. So I grew up in poverty. But I also grew up understanding some things, because you understand in the 50s and the 60s, part of the 70s, you had to live out certain things. Number one, you could survive 3 ways. One way was to act happy. As an African American, as a black person, in order to survive, if you act happy, you act like things was okay. You act like they're going fine. Whether you're hurting or not, you always just had to act like everything was okay. You had to smile when something was not worth smiling about. But that was the way it was. The second thing you can do was rebel. Rebellion was as simple as saying yes and no to somebody when you're supposed to be saying yes, sir, and no, sir. Rebellion was as simple as looking somebody in the face when you talk to them. Rebellion was as simple as calling somebody, because calling somebody by their first name.
Oh, yeah.
That was rebellion.
Wow.
But the third choice, you could leave. In 1965, when I graduated from high school, 75% of my classmates left Mississippi within 2 days after graduation. Going to Chicago and Detroit, looking for a better place and looking for a better way to live. But one of the things I had was that I grew up in a little town called Mendenhall. It was a place that John Perkins came back to in early 1960s. And in 1964, I had the wonderful privilege of hearing the gospel. And I heard the gospel of Jesus Christ, and I gave my life to Jesus. Let me tell you something. After I gave my life to Jesus, we used to come to Bible classes on Tuesdays and Thursday night. We would cross the railroad tracks going into the black community, and we had Bible classes on Tuesdays and Thursday night. But every time we crossed the railroad track, there was a question that went through my mind. On the side of the railroad tracks that I was going on, there were no paved streets, no street lights, no businesses, dilapidated houses, poor conditions, and the word you would write on that community would be, this whole word is hopelessness. Right across the railroad track, there were paved streets, there were street lights, there were nice houses, there were churches, there were businesses, and you could write the word hopefulness. And as a 17-year-old new Christian, I began to ask some questions. Why? Studying the Word of God and asking questions. Why? Why is that disparity between the black community and the white community? So I came up with my answers.
All right.
Y'all heard me, didn't you? I came up with my answers. I'm searching. A young Christian studying the Word, I'm searching. I came up with my answers. The first answer I came up with was God is prejudice.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. That was my answer.
Yeah, look like it.
But the more I studied the Word of God, the more I realized there's nothing wrong with God.
Amen.
God has no respect to persons.
Amen.
The second thing I came up with was maybe it's our lot in life to be second-class citizens. Maybe that's it. We're supposed to be second-class citizens. All the white folk I knew had something. All the black people I knew had nothing. Maybe it's our lot in life. Maybe it's true that Ham was cursed and Canaan was cursed. Maybe we are cursed people. But the more I read the Word of God, I found out that there was not anything wrong with me. And that I can look in the mirror and say I'm a special part of God's creation. Let me say it again, you might miss it.
Yeah.
I can look in the mirror and say I'm a special part of God's creation. The third one thing that you could do was leave Mississippi. The problem is not God. The problem is not black folk. Then the problem must be Mississippi. And Lord, if I can just get out of Mississippi, I'll be okay. Graduated high school in 1965. And John Perkins and I sat down and talked. We was talking about where you want to go to college. I said I want to go to a Christian liberal arts college. In 1965, Seminaries College in Ohio would turn me down. Mississippi College wouldn't listen to me. Belhaven College was not open. Ended up going to Pineywood School. Pineywood School had a junior college. And there at Pineywood, God sent a gospel team from Southern California to Mendenhall, Mississippi to work with John Perkins. And on that team was John MacArthur Jr., who's a prominent pastor in Southern California now. On that team was the director of admissions of L.A. Baptist College, and they found out I was a Christian, found out I played basketball, and that didn't hurt the negotiations, and began to talk to me about the possibility of going to a Christian college in California. Everything inside of me was shouting out. Boarded the bus in Jackson, Mississippi. Two of us went out there, boarded the bus in Jackson, Mississippi, went across the Mississippi River Bridge in Vicksburg and headed into Louisiana. And that sign that said, "Welcome, Mississippi," the only thing I could think about was, "Bye, Mississippi, I'm gone, and I ain't never coming back to Mississippi." But I want you to know, I got out to California and discovered that racism had beat me out there. My friend and I were the first two African Americans to go to this school. We lived in a town of 14,000. Wasn't another black person in that town. We were there for 3 months before we saw another black person. So we understood that racism was not just something in Mississippi, but it was something in California as well. But God enabled me to go there, and God enabled me to have that wonderful opportunity. And I remember coming back home the summer of 1968, and I was going into my senior year of college. I wanted to find me a job in Mendenhall, but there were no jobs for black people except cotton fields, cornfields, pulpwood yard, service jobs. I'm getting ready to go to my senior year of college. I wanted a job in the department store, in the bank. I wanted a job of status so that I can say to the rest of the young people in the community, education makes a difference. If I'm a senior in college out there in the cotton fields, what's that telling those other young people? It was not there. And John Perks and I started talking about creating our own job. So the summer of 1968, we started a summer program. In the summer of 1969, we started a summer program of tutoring. 1970, traveled with a Christian basketball team that toured the Orient, was playing basketball in Taiwan and Philippines and Hong Kong when the coach began to challenge me about full-time Christian service overseas. And the first thing out of my mouth was any place but Mississippi. And the Holy Spirit took over. The Holy Spirit started said, Dolphus, are you thinking about going to a mission field? Or are you running away from a mission field? Let me say that again. God, Dolphus, are you thinking about going to a mission field? Or are you running away from a mission field? And I discovered I was running away from a mission field. And there God confirmed in my heart that he wanted me to come back to Mississippi. Came back home, went and graduated from college and seminary, had my bachelor's degree in biology and my master's in Christian education. John Perkins and I began to talk about come back to Mississippi. And the saddest words I could hear from his mouth was, we want you to come back to Mississippi, but go raise your own support. Wow. Where do black people go when they got to raise their own support? That was painful. Because everything inside of me said, Dolphus, you didn't go to college. You didn't go to get an education so that you can come back and go beg people to pay support you. But God opened some doors, and we were able to move to make that happen. Came back to Mississippi chasing a dream. Part of that dream is it possible for this gospel to work in a poor community? Woo! The best thing you do is tell poor people, give yourself to Jesus, give your life to Jesus in one day.
My God.
Do y'all hear me? It's all over our churches.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Swing low, sweet chariot. One day a chariot's going to come down and take me out of my problem.
Yes, it is.
Steal away home. Ain't got long to stay here. Soon, very soon. I've got shoes, you've got shoes. All of God's children got shoes. When I get to heaven, guess what? I'm going to pick up my shoes.
Come on now.
And so in other words, poverty is poverty, and we need to accept poverty, and we need to understand that that's the way it is. And I don't believe the gospel called for us to say that's the way it is. We need to talk about how do we take this faith into the community and begin to work with folk and begin to understand that God has something better for people that we deal with. So in Mendenhall, we started this thing called, we started a tutoring program, we started an adult education program, a health clinic, and we started all these things. But in order to do that, I had to travel 60% of my time around the country. Because the black church in Mississippi at that time had no mission program. And the white church was not open to us. So we had to travel around the country to make it happen. And people would ask me many times, said, Dolphus, tell me about the Christian church, the white Christian church in Mississippi, and I didn't have an answer. I didn't know anybody. But I remember in 1983, 84, I got an invitation to go to First Presbyterian Church, and it's okay. This is my story.
All right.
And the story is what it is.
All right now.
Okay? It's not a negative, it's a story. It's my story.
All right.
And the mission committee looked at me and said, Dolphus, we like what you're doing, but we're supporting a black ministry in Canton, Mississippi. Do you want us to stop supporting that black ministry and start supporting you? And I looked at him and said, no way. If you believe that God only wants you to support one black ministry, you keep on supporting it.
Yes.
And I walked out of the room. But listen to this. 4 years later, I was preaching at Second Presbyterian Church in Memphis, Tennessee. And the pastor called me off to the side and said, Dolphus, this First Presbyterian Church in Jackson is supporting you. And I said, no. He said, go back. I told him my story. He said, go back. There's a pastor there by the name of Jim Baker. When I came back and shared my story, and First Pres got involved. You see, the church in Mississippi has to wake up. We got to take responsibility. Going to Africa and Asia and Latin America and Haiti, that's all right. But we got to understand that the word is, Jubilee says, we got to learn how to work together and understand that poverty is in our backyard. 1990, the late Stuart M. Irby came to Mendenhall and talked to me about becoming the first African American to serve on the board of Belhaven College. Started serving on the board in 1991. A school I couldn't come to in the 60s, I now serve on the board of. By 1998, I understood that the problem of the church in Mississippi was not just a denominational problem, it was a racial problem. And this organization started asking me to become a part of it called Mission Mississippi. And I began to say, okay, maybe there's an opportunity now to begin to work to break down walls in the black church and the white church so that we can begin to talk about working together. If we work together, we can make some things happen. And in April of 1998, I spoke at the Mission Mississippi prayer breakfast. And right after I finished, on the platform was Dr. Frank Pollard, pastor of First Baptist Church. He said to me, Dolphus, I want you to preach that same message at First Baptist Church on Sunday morning. And I said, okay. 3 months later, he called me and said, Dolphus, I'm still working on it. He said, you need to understand, Dolphus, a black man has never stood in the pulpit on Sunday morning at First Baptist Church. And I said, okay. 3 months later, he called me back and said, Dolphus, I'm still working on it. But you need to understand that not many years ago, deacons used to come every Sunday morning early to the church so they can stand in the doorway to make sure that no black people would come in to worship. That's the attitude of the church historically. Now we're talking about bringing a black man into the pulpit on Sunday morning. Dolphus, that's a lot to ask, but don't give up on me. A few months later, he called me back and said, Dolphus, we have a date set. November 18th, 1998. In the morning, I woke up and I was praying about 4 o'clock in the morning, going through my notes, and I started crying. You know the kind of crying where you can't stop. I said, Lord, you know I can preach this message in Chicago. You know I can preach it in New York. You know I can preach it anywhere around the country. But Lord, I can't preach it in Jackson, Mississippi. There are too many ghosts in the room. And we need to exercise some ghosts in order for us to move forward, to make some things happen. That morning, I preached. And there were people lined up, ready to say it's time for us to move forward. It's time for us to move forward. Now that church is doing some good things. A number of churches are doing some good things. A number of things are happening to make a difference. The problem facing the poor community in Mississippi going forward is not for white people to solve or the black people to solve it. It's for the Christians to begin to solve it.
Yes.
Wake up.
Yes.
You are not a white Christian. Wake up, you're not a black Christian. Wake up to the fact that you are a Christian. You just happen to be black. Listen to this. One day we get to heaven, you might trade it in. It ain't going to make no difference.
Yes.
You got to wake up and understand that that's what it is. We need to start working together, sharing together, and praying together to make it happen together. And I believe that it can happen. But you know something? Dealing with these kind of things is always hard, and it's not easy. My years in Mendenhall, we had a hard time getting in and out of places. I remember that we talked about starting a community law office. And the white conservative Christians said, you don't need to have no law office. Lawyers, you don't need to have lawyers. You don't need to be working with lawyers. And I wanted to tell them what about them lawyers who put their tithes in their offering. I didn't go there. I didn't go there. But what we were trying to say is, we want poor people to be able to say, I'm going to call my lawyer. Y'all missed it. Poor people, historically, were not able to say, I can call my lawyer.
No.
We need to understand that poor people need to have access as much as others have access. Well, in 1998, my wife and I, with $0, decided that we wanted to start a foundation. $0 and 2,000 books. We began to say, we believe that we want to start a foundation. You know, that was difficult because we kept running into people who were saying, well, why do you want to do that? Running into people saying, I don't believe in endowments. Running into people saying, endowments make people lazy. Running into people saying, your faith is not, you need to have faith. Don't depend on an endowment. And I looked around, they were owning buildings and houses and businesses. And they were telling me about not having an endowment. And it hurt my heart for somebody to be able to put it up, but it didn't stop. And that's why I want to say to us, don't stop, keep pressing on, because we wanted to see people who have a heart for the rural poor to also have an access to be able to say, we can sit down and make a decision to give somebody $5,000. Woo! We can sit down and make a decision to give somebody $10,000. We began the process by having $0. I remember that over a 20-year period, we sold $20,000 worth of books. We built a $2.8 million endowed foundation. And we're working with 12 different rural ministries in Mississippi right now. But the hard thing is, it could have been 5 million or 10 million, because I talked to people who had resources. But we need to understand, people who got resources many times don't think that the poor need to have access. And we need to move and make that happen. It's difficult to get things to happen and to move forward. But let me just talk about this. What do we need to do going forward, and then I'll be through. Continue to work on racial attitudes, black, white. Continue to work on accountability, because we all need to understand that. Continue to work on reducing, this whole thing that free programs will solve the problem of poor people. Poor people need to be held accountable.
That's right.
We got to quit saying poor people can't do this and can't do that. We have to begin to understand that and make it happen. And then we got to build a new generation of leaders who will give back. It's one thing to ask somebody else to do something. It's another thing for us to build to do it. And let me tell you a story. 10 years ago, my daughter walked in and gave me a check for $5,000. And I started crying. She said, Daddy, why are you crying? I said, I'm crying because I never had a black person in the 35 years of fundraising all across this country. All across the country. Been in black churches and white churches, and been in churches in the inner city and churches in the suburbs. I've never had a black person give me a check for $5,000. Well, the next year she gave me one for $10,000. She wanted to see me cry again. But you know something? We got to grow them up. It's not about running away from the community. There are 3 things I think we need to do in our young people. We need to teach them how to come back. Yes. We got to teach them how to serve back. And we got to teach them how to give back. Let me say that again. I think you missed that. Because the problem is, we move into upward mobility And we think we can't give back. We can't serve back. We can't. We're too busy satisfying our own selfish stuff that we can't give back. And I want to encourage us that God can use us to give back in a wonderful and fantastic and marvelous way. Let me close with this word here. It says this.
Yes, sir.
I'm excited about it. I heard about this group that's trying to develop a leadership foundation in Jackson similar to Memphis Leadership Foundation. I'm excited about that because this group is going to talk about pulling together some folk to have a heart to deal with the poor. It can be done. It can be done. It's not impossible. The people of God can make it happen.
Amen.
And we're excited about being the fact that that's my story, at least as part of it at this point. Thank you so very much.